Barbara Oakley failed every math class she ever took. She enlisted in the army to study Russian, as far from numbers as she could get. Then at 26, she decided to retrain her brain. She went on to earn a doctorate in engineering. Welcome to Whispering Pages. If you're here just for the summary, skip to the next chapter. For the rest of us, let's ease in. Let the day go. Whatever didn't get finished can wait until morning. The minutes before sleep are when your brain is most open to new ideas. What you hear tonight consolidates while you rest. This is A Mind for Numbers by Barbara Oakley, 2014. Get comfortable. Close your eyes if you'd like. And let's whisper through this one together. Barbara Oakley grew up convinced she was not a math person. She had the evidence. She failed her way through high school math and science, loathed every minute of it, and left certain those subjects simply weren't for her. She had other gifts: language, history, culture. She enlisted in the army to study Russian, and she was brilliant at it. She graduated with honors. Then the army commissioned her into the Signal Corps, the technical branch. Suddenly she was surrounded by officers who spoke the language of circuits and radio systems, a language she had never learned and actively avoided. And for the first time, she understood what she'd been missing. The technically skilled people around her were the problem solvers. They were the ones who mattered. She made a decision. At 26, she would retrain her brain. She enrolled in remedial trigonometry and started from the bottom. It was frightening work. But slowly, she began to catch on. By the time she reached her doctoral studies, she was excelling. She earned degrees in electrical engineering, then a master's, then a doctorate in systems engineering. That transformation, from someone who believed she could not do math to a professor of engineering, became the question that drove this book. How had she done it? Could she pass the method on? A Mind for Numbers, published in 2014, is her answer. It draws on neuroscience and cognitive research, but it's written for the person who has struggled. Oakley's core argument is deceptively simple. Most people who struggle with math and science aren't struggling because they lack ability. They are struggling because no one ever taught them how to learn. And learning, real, lasting learning, has a structure. Once you understand that structure, everything changes. The foundation of that structure is understanding how your brain actually processes new information. Oakley describes two modes of thinking that your brain uses at all times. She calls them focused mode and diffuse mode, and the relationship between them is the heart of the entire book. Focused mode is exactly what it sounds like. It's the state you enter when you sit down, concentrate, and work deliberately on a problem. Your thinking becomes narrow and directed. You're applying what you already know, running along familiar neural pathways. This is the mode most people think of as studying. It's where effort lives. Diffuse mode is almost the opposite. It's the relaxed, background state your brain enters when you step away, when you take a walk, let your mind wander, take a shower, or fall asleep. In diffuse mode, your brain is still working, but it's working broadly. It's making connections across distant areas, finding links you couldn't see when you were staring directly at the problem. Here's what makes this so important. Neither mode alone is enough for learning something genuinely new. Focused mode lets you absorb and practice specific ideas. Diffuse mode lets your brain integrate and consolidate those ideas into something deeper. You need both. The mistake most people make, the mistake Oakley made for years, is they only ever try to learn in focused mode. They sit down, stare at the material, work harder and harder. When they get stuck, they push harder still. But that's precisely when diffuse mode could save them. The mathematician Henri Poincaré once described solving a difficult problem that had defeated him for weeks. He took a vacation. As he stepped onto a bus in the south of France, the answer appeared in his mind, fully formed, completely clear. His brain had kept working on the problem while he was resting. He just had to get out of focused mode long enough for it to deliver the solution. You've probably experienced this yourself. You work on something for hours, get nowhere, sleep on it, and in the morning the path forward seems obvious. That's not magic. That's diffuse mode doing its job. Oakley's first practical lesson is to stop treating a break as failure. A genuine break, where you truly step away from the problem, is not giving up. It's a deliberate invitation to diffuse mode. It's learning strategy. But here's the nuance she's careful to add. You can't skip focused mode and just take breaks and hope your brain solves things. Diffuse mode needs something to work with. You have to prime the pump first. Actually engage with the material, wrestle with it, make a real effort, and then step away. Without that initial focused engagement, diffuse mode has nothing to process. So the rhythm of deep learning looks something like this: focused effort, genuine rest, focused effort again. Back and forth, over time. Not cramming. Not marathon sessions. A patient, alternating rhythm that lets your brain do what it was actually built to do. So you understand the two modes, focused and diffuse, effort and rest, concentration and stepping away. But even if you're doing both, there's still a problem that can undermine everything. Oakley calls it the illusion of competence. It explains why so many people study hard and still fail. Here's how it happens. You're reading through your notes or your textbook. The material starts to feel familiar. You recognize the formulas, the concepts, the terms. You feel a quiet sense of understanding settling in. You feel like you know it, but you don't. Not yet. What you're experiencing is recognition, not recall. These are two completely different things. Recognition means the material looks familiar when you see it. Recall means you can retrieve it independently, from scratch, without the page in front of you. And only recall is actual learning. Research published in the journal Science tested this directly. Students studied a scientific text and then either reread it, drew concept maps, or tried to recall it from memory. The ones who used recall, who closed the book and tried to remember as much as they could, then restudied and recalled again, learned far more and retained it far longer. Even more striking, the students themselves predicted that concept mapping would be the most effective method. They were wrong. This is the trap. The most effective learning strategies often feel harder than the ineffective ones. Rereading feels productive because it's comfortable. Recall feels difficult because it actually is. But it's the difficulty that creates the learning. Every time you struggle to retrieve something from memory, you are deepening the neural pathway that holds it. The struggle is not a sign of failure. It's the mechanism of learning itself. Oakley introduces chunking alongside this. A chunk is a compact, well-practiced unit of knowledge that your brain can retrieve and use as a single piece rather than many separate steps. Think about how you tie your shoes. You don't consciously think about each individual movement anymore. The whole action is chunked into one smooth thing. Expert knowledge works the same way. When you first encounter a new concept, each part requires conscious effort. What does this symbol mean? How does this relate to that? You're holding multiple pieces in working memory at once, which is exhausting. Working memory is small, Most people can hold roughly 4 pieces of information at any moment. But as you practice, those pieces begin to fuse into a single chunk. The concept becomes one thing, not 10 things. And once it's chunked, it takes up only one slot in working memory, freeing the rest for higher-level thinking. This is how experts think. They've built a library of chunks over years of practice, and those chunks let them see problems at a higher level than beginners can. How do you build chunks? 3 conditions matter. First, focused attention on the material, genuine concentrated engagement. Second, you need to understand the concept, not just see it. Grasp why something works, not just how. Third, and most critically, practice. Understanding alone does not create a chunk. You have to work through problems, apply the concept in different contexts, and revisit it across multiple sessions. That last word matters, sessions. Not one long session. Multiple sessions, spread over days. Oakley introduces spaced repetition here, returning to material after a gap rather than massing all your practice into one sitting. The research on this is extremely strong. A little practice every day creates far stronger memory than a lot of practice once. This is because sleep plays a critical role in memory consolidation. Each night, your sleeping brain replays and strengthens the neural patterns you built during the day. Cramming bypasses this entirely. You pack information in, but your brain has no time to consolidate before the test. One more idea completes this picture: interleaving. Most students, when learning a new technique, practice it over and over in one session until they feel confident. This creates a false sense of mastery. You're learning to recognize which technique belongs to which chapter, not to actually solve problems. Interleaving means deliberately mixing different types of problems in your practice, even when it's uncomfortable. You don't just work on one problem type until you feel solid, then move on. You mix them. You practice switching without knowing in advance which technique to apply. This is harder. It feels slower. But it trains you for actual exams and real life, where problems don't come pre-labeled with the method needed to solve them. The core insight underneath all of this is that what feels like learning and what actually is learning are often different things. Familiarity feels like knowledge. Rereading feels like studying. Oakley is asking you to feel the discomfort of genuine learning, and trust it. There's a force that works against everything we've talked about so far. It's not lack of intelligence. It's not lack of time. Oakley argues it might be the single greatest obstacle to learning: procrastination. When you look at a task you're dreading, a problem set, a chapter you've been avoiding, your brain's discomfort center actually activates. This isn't a metaphor. Brain imaging studies show genuine discomfort in response to subjects people dislike. And your brain's response to that discomfort is completely predictable. It shifts attention to something more pleasant. You suddenly remember you need to check your messages. You'll start in just a few minutes. This is procrastination. Not laziness. Not weakness. A learned neurological habit, a way your brain has figured out to relieve discomfort quickly. And here's the important part: the discomfort fades almost immediately once you look away. That fast relief is what makes procrastination so effective as a habit. It works. In the short term. The long-term cost is everything. Oakley draws on habit loop research to explain how procrastination gets its grip. Every habit, good or bad, follows a simple cycle: a cue, a routine, and a reward. The cue is whatever triggers the habit. For procrastination, cues are everywhere. looking at a difficult assignment, feeling underprepared, even just sitting at your desk at the wrong time. The routine is the familiar escape, social media, tidying, anything but the task. The reward is the immediate relief of having stepped away from the discomfort. The key insight Oakley offers is this: you don't need to change everything about this loop. You only need to change your reaction to the cue. The cue will happen. The craving for relief will appear. The question is what you do in the moment between the cue and the routine. Her primary tool is the Pomodoro technique, named for the tomato-shaped kitchen timer its inventor used. Set a timer for 25 minutes, work with complete focus, then take a 5-minute break. Repeat. What makes it work is that it shifts attention away from the outcome, finishing the chapter, solving all the problems, and toward the process. Just 25 minutes of effort. Not a result. Just work. This matters because the pain that triggers procrastination is usually tied to the product. The daunting size of the task, the uncertain outcome, the fear of failure. But the process, sitting down and working for 25 minutes, carries almost none of that weight. Almost anyone can do 25 minutes. The Pomodoro technique also exploits something Oakley notes consistently: getting started is the hardest part. Once you're actually engaged with the material, the discomfort fades rapidly. The pain is concentrated in anticipation, not in the doing. So anything that lowers the barrier to starting, a short timer, a simple first step, just opening the book, disproportionately helps. Alongside this, Oakley recommends a planner journal. Write your task list the evening before, not the morning of. Research suggests that writing your intentions down before sleep gives your brain time to process and plan overnight, so you wake up already oriented toward your tasks. Keep the list small, 5 to 10 items maximum. And critically, plan a quitting time, not just a starting time. When are you stopping today? This sounds counterintuitive, but it's deeply important. Unlimited work time creates the pressure that feeds procrastination. When the day feels like it could stretch forever, there's always a reason to start later. A firm quitting time creates a genuine deadline, not just for finishing, but for starting. If you're stopping at 5, you'd better get moving. Oakley also makes a subtle but significant distinction between process goals and product goals. A product goal sounds like this: finish the problem set. A process goal sounds like this: work on the problem set for 25 minutes. The product goal triggers the anxiety spiral. You might not finish, you might get stuck, you might do it wrong. The process goal is entirely within your control. You can always just work. That shift, from measuring yourself against outcomes to measuring yourself against effort, is one of the most practical things this book offers. One more piece matters here: belief. Knowledge of a system isn't enough to make it stick. You also need to actually believe the system will work. For many people, that belief develops only by testing it and seeing it succeed, even in small ways. So Oakley encourages starting with the smallest possible version. 1 Pomodoro. 1 page. 1 problem. Let the small wins accumulate into the conviction that you can actually do this, and let that conviction carry you into harder work. The deeper message running through all of this is that willpower is a limited resource, and trying to power through procrastination by force is a losing strategy. You design your environment, your routines, and your rewards to make starting easy and staying on task the path of least resistance. You stop relying on motivation, which is unreliable. You start relying on structure, which isn't. A mind for numbers goes deeper into memory, and what Oakley presents here surprises most people, because it runs against how we usually think about remembering things. The standard assumption is that memory is primarily verbal. You read something, understand it, remember it with words. But Oakley points out that human memory systems are far more powerful in the visual and spatial domain. Our ancestors spent hundreds of thousands of years navigating landscapes, tracking animals, remembering routes. That spatial memory is ancient and deeply wired. Our capacity to remember abstract symbols, by comparison, is relatively new and comparatively limited. The practical consequence, attaching visual and spatial hooks to abstract ideas dramatically improves how well they stick. Oakley introduces the memory palace technique, one of the oldest memory systems in the world, used by ancient Greek and Roman orators to memorize hours of speech. The method works like this. Call to mind a physical location you know very well, your home, your route to work. Then mentally walk through it, and at each landmark, place a vivid image representing something you want to remember. The stranger and more emotionally charged the image, the better. When you need to retrieve the information, you mentally walk the same route and the images surface naturally. Memory champions use this to memorize entire decks of shuffled cards in under a minute. But you don't need to be a competitor for it to help. Anytime you need to remember a sequence of facts, steps, or concepts, placing them in a familiar physical space gives your brain the hooks it needs to retrieve them reliably. The key principle is the same one that runs through the whole book. Your brain learns better through association and context than through raw repetition. When you give an idea a visual image, a physical location, an emotional charge, you're building multiple pathways to retrieve it. More hooks, more durable memory. Oakley pairs this with what she calls equation poems, translating mathematical relationships into visual metaphors. Rather than treating a formula as symbols to memorize, you ask, what story does this tell? What physical reality does it describe? Einstein famously thought in images long before he translated his intuitions into mathematics. That kind of thinking isn't just for physicists. It's a technique anyone can practice. She also addresses something few people talk about, the relationship between slower learning and deeper understanding. The culture around education rewards speed. Fast learners get gold stars. But Oakley argues that people who process things more slowly often understand them more deeply. They can't skip steps. They have to truly understand each one before moving on, and that thoroughness produces more resilient, more flexible knowledge. She's also honest about the advantages of a smaller working memory. People with smaller working memories tend to be more creative. Their minds can't hold too many things at once, which forces them to generalize and compress. They build connections more freely across domains. Their thinking is looser in ways that produce unexpected insights. From here, the book moves into using your whole brain. Oakley describes a bias in formal education toward sequential, analytical thinking. But the pattern-sensing, big-picture side of your brain is where you catch errors, check whether an answer feels right, and see the whole at once. Experts consciously work both. They solve analytically, then step back and ask, does this make sense? Is this answer plausible? She calls this a global perspective check, a habit of looking at your work from a distance before finalizing it. This protects against the Einstellung effect, the tendency, once you have an approach that seems to work, to keep pursuing it even when the problem calls for something different. Your first idea blocks your ability to see a better one. Experts keep solutions provisional, willing to abandon what isn't working. The final theme in this part of the book is teamwork. Studying with others genuinely, working through problems together, not just comparing answers, serves as a kind of external diffuse mode. When you explain your thinking to someone else, you catch errors you couldn't see alone. When someone challenges your approach, you're forced to examine assumptions you didn't know you were making. Niels Bohr specifically sought out the young Richard Feynman as a thinking partner during the Manhattan Project, not because Feynman was the most accomplished in the room, but because Feynman was the only one who would tell Bohr directly when his ideas were wrong. Everyone else was too deferential to be useful. Study groups that avoid criticism and focus on reassurance are pleasant but useless. Study groups that welcome hard questions and genuine disagreement are where real learning happens. The final chapters of A Mind for Numbers pull everything together through two lenses: test-taking and the broader question of what it means to learn something for life. On tests, Oakley offers a technique that goes against everything most students are taught. She calls it hard start, jump to easy. The classic advice is to begin with easy problems and build momentum before tackling hard ones. Her research-based advice is the opposite. Start with the hardest problem you can identify. Work on it for a minute or two. Then, before you get stuck, deliberately move to an easier problem. Here's why this works. When you load a difficult problem into your mind and then turn your attention away, you've primed your diffuse mode. It begins working on that problem in the background while your conscious attention is on something easier. By the time you return to the hard problem, your diffuse mode has often done some of the work. Solutions appear that weren't visible before. It's the same mechanism as sleeping on a problem, compressed into the time span of an exam. She also addresses test anxiety directly. The physical sensations of anxiety, racing heart, sweaty palms, tightening in the chest, are actually the same physical sensations as excitement. Research has found that simply reframing your internal story changes performance. Telling yourself "I'm excited" rather than "I'm afraid" produces measurably better outcomes on difficult cognitive tasks. The body state doesn't change, but the interpretation does, and the interpretation turns out to matter enormously. Two books deserve mention alongside this one. Make It Stick, by Brown, Roediger, and McDaniel, goes deeper into the retrieval practice research that underlies Oakley's recall recommendations. If you found yourself surprised by the evidence against rereading and concept mapping, Make It Stick is where to go next. It fills the gap between Oakley's accessible treatment and the full weight of the cognitive science. The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg covers the habit loop architecture that Oakley draws on for her procrastination chapters. Where Oakley applies it to studying specifically, Duhigg explores the mechanics of habit change across every domain of life. Together, the two books provide the deeper foundations for what Oakley is building on. The honest critique of A Mind for Numbers is that it was written primarily for students in formal education, people working through math, science, engineering, or related fields. Oakley is clear about this, and to her credit, much of the book transcends that context. The focused and diffuse mode framework, the procrastination system, the memory techniques, the spaced repetition principle all apply broadly to any serious learning endeavor. But the worked examples lean heavily on equations, problem sets, and exams. If you're a professional learner trying to absorb a new field, apply new skills, or retrain in mid-career, the translation is there, but you have to make it yourself. What the book does that almost nothing else does is give you an honest picture of what learning actually is at the neurological level. Not what it looks like, what it is. And that picture, two modes, chunking built through recall and spacing, procrastination as a pain relief habit, memory as a visual and associative system, is both humbling and clarifying. It explains why so many of our natural instincts about studying are wrong. And it gives you a set of practices grounded in how the brain actually works. There's a quiet and profound message running beneath all of it, and it's this: ability is not fixed. The brain Oakley had at 26, the one that had failed every math class, was the same brain that later earned a doctorate in engineering. Nothing changed except her approach to learning. She didn't become smarter. She became a better learner. And that distinction is available to anyone. Tonight, as you drift off, carry just one thing with you. The next time you feel stuck on a problem, a project, a skill you're trying to build, don't push harder. Step away. Trust your diffuse mode to keep working while you rest. Learning isn't always supposed to feel like effort. Sometimes it sounds exactly like this, like a quiet voice in the dark, slowly making something new feel familiar. Sleep well. And we'll see you at Whispering Pages for the next one.